What were each of your thought processes, individually and jointly, when you decided to come back for another year?
That's a great question.
That is a great question.
You want to start, or do you want me to start?
Yeah. So, obviously, we both really enjoy it here, but that wasn't something that, like, decided. I mean, it was, but it's like.
But it's a big decision.
What we were thinking. I don't know how to. You start.
So I guess
it's a hard one to unpack.
From my perspective, it's all about just thinking about like the opportunity cost of what you're about to do, and so like really what the options that you're weighing is option one, which is what we thought was going to happen, is after a year we would be hired by somebody else and then further the education in a managerial position, most likely down this sort of regenerative grazing management path, right? That's like option one. And so option two, which became available to us later in the year, was staying here for another year. And so you just got to think about, all right, staying here for another year, what am I stand to gain and what do I stand to miss out on, or not miss out on, but delay a year. And so those things would be like, you'd be living in a different part of for me, it was you'd be living in a different part of the country. You might have a slightly better living situation than 2 people in a trailer, soon to be 3 people in a trailer. You will be paid more than we're being paid now. It's more responsibility, so it's a different kind of education, like furthering that, right? But all these things are going to happen. It's just delaying it for a year. So then you just start to think about the advantages of staying here, and the biggest one is just more repetition in a safe environment, so to speak, as in we understand the system at this point to a T, and so all of those hiccups and situations, that stuff that goes wrong, like we were talking about earlier, it's just more experience under the belt on dealing with those things and learning how to put out all sorts of different kinds of fires, and that is just so valuable, being in a situation to be able to do that with basically no risk, as in the purpose is to learn. It's not to be making money for yourself or making money for somebody else. And so
another thing too is like the people, the more people we'll be able to meet, because like
yeah,
we met
absolutely.
so many cool people at the grazing schools and people coming for farm tours. And
you
stuff.
Guys on
exactly.
this platform.
And so like, we got a whole another year of that of meeting people in the field, and then another more opportunities to come up, and then also the Greg's never had 2-year interns before.
Yep.
And so it's like it's kind of like another thing on our resume, so to speak, that we can put on that we're doing well here, and we're able to stay an extra year.
Yeah.
So.
And along those lines, like this, talking about like the springboard as far as opportunities in the future that we've sort of delayed for a year, there's a very high likelihood that we're going to have opportunities in a year that we wouldn't have had starting now, because purely the fact that Greg's reach and scope as an expert in the regenerative agriculture field is growing every year. I mean, his YouTube channel is just consistently grows, if you want to use that as a metric, but just like the amount of people that are underneath that are aware of who Greg is and therefore aware of who we are gets larger and larger every year. And so delaying it a year means that we might be capturing some interesting opportunities that we might not have been able to capture after this year. Also, like the COVID thing probably would be died down by then as well. And so
who knows?
that probably wouldn't have had a huge impact just because of the nature of the industry and the fact that, for a lot of people, business went up in the agriculture industry, like regenerative, small-scale, sustainable agriculture industry, when COVID hit, because there was all sorts of food insecurity issues and whatever. So that was sort of a good thing, but you just never know what opportunities wouldn't have been available because of that. So just weighing all of those things, there's really not a lot of downsides for staying for another year, and there was a lot of upsides for staying for another year.
And
we both and we're obviously we're both at different parts in our lives by a couple years, and so
like in the grand scheme of things, a year
is nothing.
It's not that much time, and so like it's not like we're missing out on you know, if we were to start a year ahead, it's not like it's going to make that big of a deal.
Yeah.
In the long run or whatever, or you know, like
yeah.
a year's went by quick, and it's going to go by quick again. So
yeah, and I will say that like because we're like obviously because we're different people, like we each had to think about it ourselves and talk to our families about it or friends or whoever to just sort of work through it, and that took a couple days, and we.
It was like a week.
Thought it over.
Well, it took a couple days.
Took a couple days, and then we talked to Greg and Jan like probably a week later. But yeah, it's just making sure you don't make a hasty decision. So yeah, I mean we're pumped about it, and yeah, that was the decision making process. But I think also something to consider is like Greg obviously had something to offer us. As far as the learning opportunities, like we just talked about, the learning opportunities, the springboard opportunities, like that kind of stuff. He had like more to offer us staying for another year. If you're somebody who's thinking about, I'm going to give a 2-year option for my interns, I would make sure that you're capable of making that second year worth their while, if that makes any sense. As far as like helping put them in a better position. If it's just going to be more of the same, and they're basically going to be as good as they were, it's if you're just trying to take advantage of them as far as like free labor or cheap labor for another year, like that really shouldn't be the way you're looking at it. You need to be thinking about it's going to be harder to like give them more, if that makes any sense. Like you're already operating at a high level, so those incremental increases in skill are so much harder to achieve. You need to be capable as a mentor of bringing them to those like incremental next levels, which is a lot harder than taking somebody from square zero and bringing them to step 10 or whatever, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's all right.
That was a good question.
We haven't been asked that before.
No.